The poll also finds negative perceptions about the economy do remain a problem for the incumbent. 63% of swing state voters say the U.S. economy is in not so good or poor condition, while just 36% say it's in excellent or good condition.
Ooh, this is going to be what's driving everything. Remember, Carville said it's the economy, stupid, and people are going to be going to vote in November going, okay, the previous 4 years I was doing pretty good. Yeah, there was a lot of spending, and then we had the COVID thing. But otherwise, the tax cuts, there were some things that were pretty good. Comparing that to whatever the hell Biden is doing, I don't even know. It kind of makes sense. Welcome back to the program. Dana Loesch here with you. You can listen coast to coast. You can watch us, Channel 347, DirecTV, X, everywhere else. I just want to get to our guest because I miss talking to her, and she's like my favorite person to talk about money. She likes making people money. She loves making money. She's a capitalist, and she knows a lot about it. And she's sounding the alarm on a lot of this stuff. And I'm trying not to have anxiety. I like how she calls herself a recovering investment banker. But Carol Roth, New York Times bestselling author of You Will Own Nothing, which is now like the biggest catchphrase in the entire election cycle. And I think currently. And make sure you check out her newsletter as well, carolroth.com. Because she's going to tell you everything that you need to know and want to know going up into November. Carol, good to see you. So, the economy is the number one issue. And yet I keep reading all these super scary headlines like danger, debt ahead. Everything is getting completely unsustainable. And I was reading this piece just the other day about we could actually have all the debt could trigger a market shock. And I don't see any way out of this.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought me on the program, Dana, to talk about really happy things as usual. And I love in the clip that they said that this economic situation is a problem for the incumbent, as it's not a giant problem for middle class and working class Americans every single day. No, it's his problem. No, I kind of think it's our problem. It is getting really scary. And this is something that everybody has raised the alarm on. The Fed, the CBO, the IMF, the Treasury, Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase, a whole slew of other billionaires. So this is the elephant in the room that everybody clearly sees, has even said, hey, I think there's an elephant in the room, but nobody's like, oh, we should get the elephant out of the room. And unfortunately, we're getting to the point where there are few options for us. I saw this ridiculous statistic. It's real, but it's ridiculous in terms of what it represents that came out of Bank of America research this past week. And basically, what the analyst did is he projected where the interest expense alone on our debt is going. And he said that if the spending continues on the current trajectory and there's no change in interest rates this year, by the end of the year, we will have an annualized spend of $1.6 trillion, which would make it the largest budget item, more than Social Security. So we are now on track to spend more on things, not new things, to paying for the debt, stuff that we've already, quote unquote, bought, than for anything else. And raising taxes is not going to solve this.
No.
Cutting programs, if it was done in a way that didn't sort of upend the economy, might be able to do that. But no politician is going to have the will to be the one to stand up and go, we need to have a serious conversation with it. So outside of massive growth, massive productivity, a breakthrough in quantum computing or something that just, really moves us forward, kind of like .com did, back in the 90s, really the option they have left is to print more debt, to monetize that. That creates more inflation in our lives. And so the reality is, because we do not have any adults who are willing to do the difficult things. We do not have a president that was willing to let us go into a recession and let this settle out, as is natural in cycles when you have the Fed and the government messing with things. Now we have literally paid the price in terms of historic inflation. And this is something that unfortunately is not likely to go away.
I'm almost terrified to ask this next question. So talking with our good friend, Carol Roth. So what's it look like for a market crash, Carol?
Well, so that's an interesting scenario. And obviously, I can't predict the future or the timing. If I could, I would be on a super yacht in the Mediterranean, Dana, not having this lovely conversation with you. But the reality is that the government needs the market to stay hot because they depend on those capital gains taxes. They depend on companies doing well and employing people and putting money in. If we don't have that, we don't have the revenue, the deficit becomes even bigger and this entire thing spirals out of control. So what happens, as we saw, over the last few years and actually really the 15 years before that, when you have the Fed interfering and coming in and printing money and buying debt, what does that do? That inflates assets. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you because you may not be an asset holder and it washes away your purchasing power. And on an inflation adjusted basis, you're not really doing any better. But it's like that 70s skit from Saturday Night Live with Dan Aykroyd, where he's like, wouldn't you like to drive $1 million car and have a $75,000 suit? We'll all be millionaires. So unfortunately, I think that's the trajectory of what's going to happen. They can't afford to let the market just completely crash. And because of the fact that the Treasury market, not to get too wonky, needs to absorb all of the money, not only for the refinancing of our debt as it comes due, but for the new debt, the new deficits that we have that get added to the debt. I think that intervention needs to take place in order to make sure that doesn't throw up all over itself, for lack of a technical term that people understand.
Yeah.
But so we don't get the chaos in the Treasury market. So I think they're going to be putting their fingers in the dike, so to speak, trying to band-aid this for as long as possible. And, unfortunately, if we go back to you will own nothing and sort of cycles, one thing that often happens in these scenarios is war. And certainly we hope that, a big world war, we're not going to be stuck in the middle of it. But when you get an entity that is desperate and filled with debt and doesn't see a way out, that's another way to do a reset in terms of the global financial system. So we'll hope that doesn't happen, but we need to be prepared that there are a lot of outcomes here, and none of them are good for the middle and working class, which is why people need to get frustrated. They need to get loud. They need to let their elected representatives know that this is an issue, because they're just going to keep skating by until you shame them, and until every single day you say, this is not acceptable. We have too much debt. You can't keep spending like this. They're just going to keep on keeping on because it gives them more power.
That's a great point that you just made, too. Talking with our friend Carol Roth, best-selling author of several books, You Will Own Nothing being her most recent. You can find her at carolroth.com, and Carol J.S. Roth. I was trying to remember your handle on X. That's a really good point, because we just had this omnibus that went through, the two-parter omnibus. We had the one big spending package that the House approved, and it feels like it's becoming more and more difficult. I mean, previously we had at least a way through the Republican Party with some, fiscal hawks, but now it's like those are too few and far between. We have somebody who's running the House that doesn't have a lot of political capital, and I think even less experience navigating, what he's got to do in order to get some of this, more austere sort of spending, type of package through. I just feel like we have, more so now than any other time in history, such fewer options available to us to stop this and rectify it, that I'm actually, and I've never thought this before, I actually don't think we can.
So it's a can versus will. So we can, and it's not going to be pleasant, and it takes adults. So will it likely happen? If I'm a betting woman, I'm going to say that it won't. And I think that's the distinction here, is that they have the path to do it, but we don't have the people who are willing to stand up. You need to have politicians who don't care about, their own power, right? So we're talking about going against human nature, saying, I really want to do this, for the benefit of, Americans broadly, for my kids, for my grandkids, to preserve the American dream. And unfortunately, our entire system, from the time that we pick candidates to going through the election cycle on up, isn't set up for that. If you are a good person who really wants to do the right thing, you're probably not running for office, specifically at the federal level, because of the things that they put you and your family through. So the people we end up getting, in large part, there are a couple of good eggs out there, but in large part are the last people that you would want to have in charge. So what we need to do is get it back to a point where they don't have the purview, where we say, I'm sorry, this isn't what you're able to do, that you're hamstrung, that you don't have the ability to do that. But it does take getting the right people in there, at least for a moment in time, in order to do that. Or if somebody with a better legal sense than I am, I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on television or the radio, knows. But if there's a way to sue our way into saying what you're doing is unconstitutional, try to hamstring it that way, that's really the only way we get back to some normalcy. And it's really frustrating too, because we know that when the dollars are in the hands of the people who earn them, that are in the private sector, they're productive. That is what really helps grow the economy. That is an infinite opportunity. Creating wealth is an infinite opportunity. Putting it in the government's hands to redistribute that's a finite exercise.
You made a great point on this, not to interrupt you. You were talking about wasting money on ESG, DEI, and other counterproductive measures. You're like, if companies want to make a difference, they should provide more ownership opportunities. And you said stock equity gets you better outcomes than social equity. That's a great idea. I have no idea why that isn't the approach over the social equity.
This is what I've been pounding the table, is because they want to drive equity of outcomes, meaning dragging everybody down to be dependent on the government, instead of really providing that opportunity, that equality of opportunity to lead a better, more independent life, which is what we want. And, as I talk about in You Will Own Nothing, you have to own things, particularly assets that have the opportunity to appreciate and value in order to create wealth. And that's what we want for people. So if you are an employee at any level and you're helping to build a company, you should have an opportunity to help participate in that. And if companies were focusing on that kind of equity, stock equity, giving you ownership in something, instead of this faux concept of social equity, dragging everybody down to the lowest common denominator, we would have people who are thriving. We would be able to go into the communities that are hurting and give them the opportunity to live that American dream. But that doesn't serve the elite. That doesn't serve the politicians. It's just common sense, Dana. So of course we can't do that.
Yeah, we can't do that, because that's never the goal. They want to keep that distinction. That, I don't know, it's just like this weird. It's the progressivism and the progressive approach to finance. Just like is like a throwback to like feudalism days. It's the weirdest thing. It's just like that. That's what they go for.
It's a disconnection from reality. They live in a completely like made up universe, and their economics follow this made up universe.
Yeah.
Like, it would be a really great, story, mythical story, but in reality, it just doesn't work.
One day you're going to be on here to talk about super happy, like celebratory things. Like maybe
Puppies.
after November, you'll come on and be like, Dana, these tax cuts. I mean, did you expect them to completely, get rid of the IRS? I didn't. Can you believe all these capital gains tax gone? The corporate tax. Can you believe it's amazing? And then we'll celebrate. I'm waiting for that day. I'm hoping it comes.
Putting it in the universe.
We got to bring Carol in as the heavy, and then she makes everybody cry. And then then we're all sad for like the rest of the show. Carol Roth, always a pleasure. The book, if you don't have You Will Own Nothing, you need to get it. I think it should be required reading in every single college class in America. It's such a great book. Carol Roth, always a pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
Of course. Good to see you.